Today, I am here with Steven Kurland, and I'm going to let him go ahead and introduce himself and what he does. And today, we're going to be talking about financial considerations in divorce.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Steven Kurland. I'm a certified financial planner and a certified divorce financial analyst. This is my 19th year in the financial industry. Our offices are located in Maitland, Florida. My firm's name is 360 Financial Firm, and our website is 360financialfirm.com. I've been a member of the Collaborative Family Law Group of Central Florida since 2015, and we're also on LinkedIn. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, happy to have you. So, let's talk about divorce, right, and finances. This is generally what people fear the most is what's going to happen to their finances. So, at a high level, what are the significant financial issues or considerations that generally result from divorce?
Sure, the main issues include how to maintain your lifestyle. So, how much income do you need to do this?
Mhm,
What will your expenses be? How are you going to fund your retirement? And will you be financially secure?
mhm.
So, it's about income, expenses, retirement, and financial security.
So when we look at that, right, a lot of times when you look at a typical marriage, there may be one person who was generally handling a lot of those kind of financial day to day, paying the bills, dealing with the financial planner, getting, all of those things set up. And then the other person may not have that much knowledge about the financial picture. What do you recommend for the person who might not have a good understanding of the finances to get themselves into a better headspace going into that?
That's a great question, and I run into that quite a bit, including in my own family.
Mhm,
My wife, I do a lot of the financial in my family,
mhm,
but there's three steps that a spouse not handling the finances can do, right? They can sit in with the other spouse while they pay the bills. They'll give them an idea of what bills need to be paid, what kind of, amount of expenses there are. They can sit in with the other spouse while they review investments with their advisor,
mhm,
and they can hire their own team of CPA and a financial advisor if they want to do so. But sitting in with a spouse will give them a much better idea on what's going on with the household,
mhm.
whether their expenses, their savings, their checking accounts, as well as their investments.
That makes a lot of sense. And then what about managing all that after the divorce, right? So a lot of times it can kind of go one of two ways. Either somebody could lose a lot of the assets they have pursuant to the divorce, right? Or on the other side of it, they could end up coming into a large chunk of investment assets that, maybe they've never managed investments. They might not understand how the stock market works. They don't really even know what any of that means. They just know, okay, now suddenly I have all these investments and sort of where do I go from here?
That's a real good question. So it's important before they get into the divorce proceedings to hire a qualified team. So that usually consists of a certified financial planner, which is an advisor, or a CPA, and a CPA.
Mhm.
The reason being is that you want a qualified team on your side before you get into it. They can evaluate a lot of the investments, your situation, expenses, accounts, and that is good information going into a divorce proceeding.
Okay, so basically, before you're even making the decision on what we're doing with the assets, let's first make sure we understand what the implications are and what that even means with the team before the decision is even
That's cool.
made.
That's exactly
And then,
right.
of course,
So that's why it's important to have that team in place.
yeah, and then, of course, that same team would then help you obviously afterwards to manage that as well. So on that topic, right, mistakes that people can make in the divorce process, how do people avoid, making these costly mistakes? A lot of times you hear of people get divorced and, they feel like they lost everything in their divorce or, they look back and they're like, gosh, I wish I would have done all these things differently. It's a very emotional time for most people. It's very overwhelming. And sometimes you can't really see the forest for the trees, So, what are some of those things that you would recommend to people to avoid making huge, financial mistakes during that divorce process?
So after divorce, and actually any time, it's about cash flow, right? Cash flow going in, cash flow going out. Those are the things that determine whether you're going to be in a positive cash
Mhm.
flow or negative cash flow. It's going to determine how long you'll be able to sustain yourself and the lifestyle that you want. And so determining the budget and the amount of income that can be generated by your assets or other ways of getting income, such as alimony or some other means, that will determine to make sure that you're going to be financially secure in the future.
Okay. So what about like, people who go through divorce the first time around, right? They've never done this before. They hear about these terms, collaborative divorce, mediation. They don't really know what that means. Obviously, you hear about going to court, right? As an option as well. So, how does all of that play into this?
Well, if you have a team in place ahead of time, a collaborative divorce is going to create a separate team, and it's a much lower conflict than you would find in a litigation scenario. Litigation is more adversarial. So having that information going to collaborative prepares you and prepares the team to understand your situation. And so you have, being collaborative, you have a whole team there supporting you and figuring out the best way going forward for your life, making sure that your lifestyle doesn't change, making sure you're going to be financially secure. So it's lower conflict, and you have a more cooperative and collaborative group of people working for you, a larger team that assists you in making those decisions.
And then what about like other experts? So, obviously retirement accounts are a big part of divorce negotiations usually. Usually it's, the marital home and the retirement is often like the two bigger assets that most people have. Um, what about bringing in other experts for that, right? So, what does that process look like for people?
Sure. You probably, if you have any kind of 401k, or if there's a 401k or some sort of retirement plan through a company, you'll probably need to hire an attorney to do a QDRO or Quadro to get that set up correctly. You're also going to need to contact a pension administrator if there's a pension involved and get a report on the pension and how that is going to be the most effective way to going forward on dividing up the pension.
Mhm.
If the spouse is under 59 and a half years old and they need immediate funds for any of these retirement funds, they should consider withdrawing the funds during the Quadro process to avoid an extra 10% penalty. So a financial advisor will know how to transfer funds without having any tax consequences or minimizing your tax consequences. That's really what a financial advisor can assist you with.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I can imagine people, if they don't follow the right process, they could all of a sudden get hit with these huge tax bills they weren't expecting when they were just trying to follow their agreements. But like back to your earlier point, you need to first get a team in place before you make the agreements because otherwise you don't really know what the implications might be of what you're agreeing to in the first place. You're
Correct. And if you make a transfer out of retirement plan, like a 401k, and you don't transfer it into a proper type of account, you will have a large tax bill, and can be avoided if you get some expertise.
No, it makes sense. So, what about people going through divorce with children, right? What are some of the things they need to be thinking about?
So there's going to be some costs associated with potentially psychological counseling. Obviously, you might need some psychological counseling, not only for the children, but also for the parents.
Mhm.
There's also savings for college. So if the children have if there's any idea for the children to go to college, there's going to be some savings for college. There's going to be some additional costs for health insurance because it depends upon whether the child's going to be under the which spouse's health insurance plan. So somebody's going to have to cover the children's health insurance. And then the children's cost of living expenses, such as food, clothing, shelter. Those are all things that have to be considered as well. So those are I would say, the most of the costs associated with children that I'm familiar with.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about later in life? So, children are grown, we are approaching retirement age. We decide, you know what, we're just not aligned with what we want in those years, right? What are some things that financial considerations that people going through divorce later in life might be dealing with?
So I mean, retirement funding is the key thing. That's very important because what happens is you had a situation where if both people were working, you have two people working towards the retirement. If you only had one spouse working, you only have one spouse working toward retirement. So where is that money going to be coming from to fund retirement?
Mhm,
And if the person is a little older, then there's less time to save for their retirement. And there might be some investment strategies that may be changed based on their age.
mm,
If they're a little older, they may be more conservative, in which case they have not only less time, but they have to be more conservative. So the amount rate of return might be lower.
mhm,
So their income and assets could be cut in half and only one income from Social Security. So maybe they're planning on two incomes of Social Security before the divorce, and now they're going to be left with one income of Social Security.
mhm,
And if there's not enough assets, and their timeline for retirement may have to change. They may not be able to retire as soon as they want,
mm,
just because of the fact that now they're back to a single income supporting that retirement, and they also might have, and they're going to have less Social Security.
mhm.
So those are the major considerations when you're dealing with that sort of divorce later in life.
Right. So sort of reframing kind of what does retirement even look like now that we're in this different set of circumstances is a big part of that, which I can imagine is very emotional for people. It's a difficult bridge to cross, but certainly easier if you have professionals involved who can help guide you to not make huge mistakes at that point. Um, okay, so if we're looking at, like the whole picture, right? If you were to sort of leave somebody with like one big takeaway, for the person who's just kind of starting to go through a divorce process, doesn't really know where to even start, what they should be focusing on, what would be that sort of big takeaway that you would give to somebody?
Well, I would definitely, again, like we talked about, hire a team of experts to support themselves. It might include a certified financial planner, a CPA, a forensic accountant, and obviously an attorney before they go through the divorce proceedings. Having those preliminary meetings with those people would be really very advantageous for their situation.
Mhm. Awesome. Well, Stephen, if people want to find you, how do they find you? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, they can email me at steve@360financialfirm.com, or they can call me, to call or text me on my cell phone number. My cell phone number is 407-326-3656, and that is allowed for texting and phone calls. That's my mobile number. Or they can reach me at my office at 407-636-6333. That's an easier number to remember.
Yeah, lots of sixes and threes.
Yes. Well, we're with 360 Financial Firm,
I
so
like it.
I tried to make our number
That's
easy. Again, it's 407-636-6333.
perfect. Well, thanks so much, Steve. I really appreciate your time. I'm sure there's people out there who will find this and will learn a lot of sort of where to start this entire journey. And hopefully, we'll reach out to you for some guidance.
Oh, thank you very much for setting this up. I really appreciate your time in doing this for me.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.